Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Dr. Cami Benton, and I've got Len Arcuri here with All In Parent. I'm so happy to have him on to help parents navigate life in a way that supports more easy parenting, maybe in difficult situations, and hopefully even save some marriages, probably with that too. So, Len, tell us about your mission and what brought you here, and can't wait to hear.
Absolutely. Well, I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, so what I do now is I work privately with parents who are navigating more complex, challenging situations with their child. So ultimately, I strive to help them think more clearly, to make better decisions, and to follow through more consistently and powerfully. So if a parent can do that and get to that higher level, everything they're doing is going to have a greater impact. So that's really what I left my corporate career 6 years ago to do full time. And I also have a podcast, and you've been on my podcast. It's called Autism Parenting Secrets, and it's really meant to share the key insights that a parent would really benefit from understanding earlier in the journey. And it's not just autism specific, but ultimately, parent practitioners like you really help parents with what to do for a child like that. And really where I come in is with how they're operating, how they're navigating. And it really comes down to leadership and decision making. And all of us parents start the journey at a certain level, and there's a higher level available to all of us. And if we can do that work early, it makes all the difference.
And you're saying that you're, I guess, like an advisor versus a coach. Can you explain, sort of that little nuance there?
Sure. Yeah. No. When people hear kind of where I fit in, they think I'm kind of an autism coach, which is somebody who's gonna, help a parent and give them advice and kind of guide them as to what to do. And I think that can be helpful in some cases, like, parent support groups, Facebook groups, all those can be somewhat useful. But generally speaking, I've learned that parents don't necessarily need more advice from other people as much as they really need just to step into a greater place of clarity for them to discern what's right for their child. Because frankly, for my son, what worked for him may have nothing to do with what's going to help some other family. So even though it's well intentioned, I feel like oftentimes parents or other people who are giving advice freely sometimes push a parent in the opposite direction of what's helpful. So I just feel like the more powerful thing is to help parents with getting better equipped and at a much stronger position for them to trust themselves to make those decisions, as opposed to just following someone's advice or even just abdicating decision making to some expert, that might be out there. So I guess long story short, I'm all about the parent and helping the parents go from where they are to a wildly unrecognizable and a more powerful version of themselves.
It seems subtle, but a super powerful shift in perspective there. I think about my own with my wild child. I was like, oh my gosh, and I was going through a stressful time in my life, and she was super difficult. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I she needs therapy. She needs therapy. And my friend was like, no, Cammy, you need therapy. I'm like, but I'm a good mother. And she's like, it doesn't really matter, good or bad. Like, you need to work on your energy. When you fix your energy, she'll get better. And so I went and I did some therapy at that time. And then within a couple months, she had calmed down dramatically. And that was the very beginning of my lessons of understanding the shift of children when I work on myself, how it impacts your children and spouses. At that time that was not my priority at that time, but that could save marriages if you understand what the fears in your head and the overwhelm, and social media especially just fuels fear, and it's so overwhelming the amount of advice, like you said, out there.
No, no doubt. No, that you're 100% right. There's a lot of fear out there. A lot of social media, especially, is fueling comparison, and comparison can feel really miserable. And you're right. Even going back to what you started with marriages, that's a big piece of this. As a parent, especially of a child with complex challenges, there's so many relationships that can get strained and fractured. So again, there's just a very different way of responding, not reacting, responding to a diagnosis, whatever it happens to be. My son happened to be autism. It doesn't matter. It's still kind of this diagnosis comes in. None of us are prepared for it, just like none of us are really prepared to become parents, let alone a parent of a child with complex challenges. Whether it's autism, PANDAS, the list goes on about what our kids are experiencing. It's good news and bad news. The bad news, depending on how you want to frame it, is parent, it does all come down to you. It is all on your shoulders. But the good news is there's so much you can do about how you're responding to get better equipped to be able to deal with whatever comes your way. And again, your child's a piece of it, but there's a lot in terms of how a parent's operating. And most of the friction that makes the journey feel so heavy, I've learned, is stuff that we parents generate ourselves, which is great because that means we can stop it if we want. It's not beyond our control.
Yeah, it's about that awareness. And sometimes I know from personal experience, when you're feeling overwhelmed, you could barely, it's like you're barely above water and you're in survival. But when you're making decisions out of survival, I love this little example. There's the peace rally, the anti-war rally. They both desire no war, but it's the energy with which you go into it will have a different outcome. You're way more likely to have riots at an anti-war rally versus at a peace rally. It's just is that. So same thing when you're making decisions out of stress or out of fear. If you're still having to pay bills or work a job, if you're going into it with stress and fear, you're going to have a different outcome than if you're like, wow, this is a wonderful means to an end to help me provide for my family. Like it's just a
Right.
whole different experience that you'll have. And that just ripples the ripple effect of that. Um, so it's sort of what other kind of families do you help? Like you said, PANDAS, autism. Are there any other sort of areas that you help families with?
Yeah, no, it runs the whole spectrum, the whole gamut. It can be again autism spectrum, it can be ADHD, it can be PANDAS, cerebral palsy, whatever the challenge might be, doesn't really matter. It's basically, a diagnosis that usually a parent's not ready for and can create a lot of emotions, right? Whether it's fear, anxiety, worry, just something where a parent's not ready and doesn't know what to do about it. So really that doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is because the opportunity for a parent, at least where I come in, is about how they're operating. So it's not uh, diagnosis specific. The diagnosis, especially with autism, is just a label. It means nothing. It just means
Right.
you checking up boxes. So really, the key is, from my standpoint, that parents can operate at a higher level, and that's the best first step for them to do rapidly, to get more equipped, to get into a stronger position to discern what's going to help their child. So that's the key. But then once they've kind of got that more in place, it really comes down to having a strategy. And I say that because most parents don't have any strategy when it comes to responding to whatever that diagnosis is. So the final key is that parents absolutely need to have a strategy in place. It needs to be a strategy that actually addresses the underlying root causes, not just focusing on the symptoms. And if they can do that, and if they actually have a strategy they feel good about, boy, their nervous system comes way down because they have a sense of confidence, a sense of clarity, and they know they're getting to something that if they focus their time, energy, and money on the root causes that are unique for their child, they stack the deck to do what they're wanting to do, which is to help their child thrive.
Right. So same thing in like integrative medicine or functional medicine. Like people are like, do you treat this disease or that disease? And to some extent, there's some limitations and there's some more complicated things that might need higher level of care for sure. But the foundation of it is still, gut health. It's still the terrain. It's still your environment. Toxins can be chemicals or it could be toxic family members or it could
No doubt.
be, you have to look at the whole environment around it. So it sounds it's like the same situation for you. It doesn't really matter the diagnosis. You have to, the building blocks are the same. And even deeper is that spiritual aspect of how you approach every day. Like whether this is outside of religion, this is your connection to God, source, whoever you want to give credit to in your faith, but or your connection to your intuition or whatever. Is that is what makes a difference in how you manage any illness.
100%. And so I love how you frame that. So you think about functional medicine and how that works and what you do, right? Like your philosophy from a medical perspective. That is so important to unearth what are the root causes going on for that child. But the same concept applies to the parent. What root causes are preventing them from making great decisions? And again, to be able to not only help their child medically with a practitioner like you, but there's so many other aspects of this journey that matter. And again, there's a lot of root causes going on for the parent that if they can address for themselves, that's what reduces the friction that they're feeling. And I like to equate it to like a backpack. An incredible amount of weight comes out of their backpack if they can drop the weight, which is this friction that they're unintentionally generating. And a lot of it comes down to mindset and specifically the beliefs a parent's holding, the programming,
Mm,
because again, I showed up with lots of beliefs about autism, about my son who had autism, about myself. And it's these stories that we tell ourselves as parents that's going to generate most of the friction. That's why parents feel a lot of heavy emotions like fear or guilt or shame or just general anxiety. It's these stories we tell ourselves. So a big part of how I help parents is to help them first reveal their programming because we have all heard the concept of limiting beliefs and the like and you
mm,
know I guess I don't even like that term because I don't think any belief is limiting. I think beliefs are the beliefs. You don't have to judge them. Some beliefs are supportive of where you want to go and other beliefs are going to just keep you stuck. So if parents can become aware of their unique stories, even if they've held a belief that might be quote unquote limiting, they may have held it for decades, but they can drop it like that if they have that awareness and then they consciously can choose to adopt a better story. And sometimes that might be a slight tweak to that story that they're telling themselves, or it could be believing the opposite. But that belief work is such a powerful way parents can drop weight really quick.
I love Joe Dispenza's "You're the Placebo"
Oh,
book.
yeah. He's 100%
For
right.
yeah, the listeners out there, it's like there's the placebo effect that everyone's heard of. About 40% of people get better just because you tell them it's going to work, right? That's in studies, they compare it to placebo. And I remembered in my medical training, oh, it's just a placebo effect. It's just a placebo effect. Well, a placebo effect means that Aunt Jane can get better just because you tell her she's going to get better. That's really powerful, and that's without training. And then there's the nocebo effect, which is the negative. It's like the opposite. Oh, you got this cancer, you're going to die in the next 2 months. Autism or PANS brings a lot, like you said, of emotion to it. You always hear the most extreme cases. So take away the story. The story's not going to help you get your kid better or get
Right.
resources. So how do you get there? And so that's where the belief system does matter. The belief system does matter because if you believe they're never going to get better, they're never going to get better.
It matters, and honestly, it's everything. And it took me a long time to learn that, and I've got really deep training in this area because again, it's so important. And how do you shift? There's lots of different kind of books you could read, and but I've just learned that you can shift rapid. Doesn't have to take you a long time to reprogram yourself, and that's why that's the biggest power move. I'll just give one example with my son, which is really a belief that just about every parent has, right? Where, when you find yourself getting really stressful, anxious, upset, angry, whatever with your child, particularly with autism, where there's a lot of behaviors that can be really challenging, it's easy to get really reactive, to say something that you regret, in the moment. So the question is, okay, in that moment, what was the story, like for myself, what was the story I was telling myself in that moment? And the way it usually works is that that story that I was telling myself was something about my son, and in this case he kept yelling and I kept asking him to stop, but he kept yelling anyway. And so the initial story was, kind of some version of, my son's disrespecting me. He's not listening to me. I was getting angry and annoyed. Um, so my story initially was about him. Well, when I drilled down on that moment and really got to the real story I was telling myself, not the superficial one about my son, it was ultimately a story about myself. It was a story that I was a lousy parent. And that's what really fueled my anger. So I'm really simplifying here, and the belief work's kind of involved. But the key is to really discern what is the real story that's driving your emotions and your reactions. And if you can reveal that, then you can absolutely shift. Because as much as I may have felt challenged, I knew I was a good parent. I didn't have to beat myself up over my parenting to
Mhm.
become a better parent. So that shifted a lot for me. And this belief that we may hold as parents, and the one that was so relevant for me is that I was looking at my son Rye and basically judging him as not enough. I was effectively in love with the version of him that I wanted him to become. I didn't particularly like the version he was at age 2 or 3. And so that judgment of him is not enough as someone who was broken and needed to be fixed. That belief, that programming I had, which made perfect sense to me because I had lots of evidence that he was broken, but that judgment of me, of him as broken or as less than, there is no question he was feeling that. He was feeding off that energy. And even though I wanted nothing more than to be connected with him, by me believing he was broken, I was pushing him away. So if I would have stayed there, there's no way he would have made the progress he did because I wasn't presenting to him as someone who is safe, who was loving. Again, I was judging him as broken. So if a parent like I did can shift that, it really changes the dynamic. And again, my whole nervous system changed. And ultimately, you started mentioning about spirituality. Ultimately, this comes down to just unconditional love. I wasn't practicing that with him. Again, I love the version I wanted him to become. But if you can shift as a parent to loving your child as they are right now, with all those things that check enough boxes to be with, on the autism spectrum, the power move is to truly accept your child and to love them as they are. And from that place of acceptance, then respond powerfully to meeting their needs to help them thrive.
Still that intention, same actions, different intentions, you get a different result. You
Totally.
know, and the whole idea of triggers, that works for all relationships. This is not just for children with complex needs. This is like literally for spouses, for siblings, for strangers on the street. If I'm triggered, what is that really? Is it triggering my lack of safety or something from my childhood or a relationship I have with my principal? Or like if you really dig down, if you have a heightened emotional response or a reaction to something, a strong reaction, it's usually a trigger about yourself. And that's hard at first for some people to realize that you're like, it's not about me.
Right.
It usually is, honestly, if you're reacting in a strong way. So because if you know it's not about you, and if you know that I'm good, I can hold space for this person, and this is their issue, and then you don't get the emotional response. I mean, I have not mastered this, by the way. Then imagine how much calmer everyone would be. So yeah, it's the whole trigger response helps everyone. Helps everyone. Children, especially highly sensitive children, there's all kinds. I feel like our generation and the generation of our kids are we're just way more sensitive in general than we were. Like it's even the children who don't have complex needs, they're more sensitive to sounds or to touch or um, they feel your energy,
Hmm.
right? If I see you as a problem, you're going to feel that I see you as a problem, even if I'm not even articulating it, even if I'm not conscious of it at all. They're going to feel my distrust or frustration or whatever emotion. They're going to feel it. Like y'all, like children are little sponges. They
They are,
feel it all.
and they are much more sensitive now, and it's because of the environmental toxic load, and it's a very different environment than when you and I were growing up. So there's a lot of reasons for it, but yeah, all the more reason to really understand your energy matters. And what might feel like a lot of times we're in situations where we react, we feel like we're reacting to what something that's happening. But honestly, that's not the way life works. We're always responding. We're choosing a response, even if it's in a nanosecond. And so that's why the belief work matters so much, is because you're programmed. There's some stimulus that comes at you, and then there's a response that you're taking, some emotion that you're feeling, and an action that you're taking. And that all gets funneled through your belief system. So that's where if you could just reveal that programming that's totally invisible, none of us are really aware of our beliefs. But if you can do that, and it doesn't take much to do that, that's where you can change your programming. And what felt like very reactive, you can reclaim that space to actually choose a response. Going back to like Viktor Frankl and that space, right? That's where the magic is, the space between that stimulus and your response is where your freedom is. And that's true for us parents. We don't have to react. We can always be responding. And if we want to have better responses that are more aligned to the kind of parent we want to be, we just have to reveal those beliefs and hold them up and decide if we want to change them. We have the ability to do that.
And for the parents out there, I also will give women a lot of grace, remind them to give themselves grace, actually, because so many cultures, traditional cultures, will have generations of help. They have grandmas and aunties. And in this country, we have prided ourselves on separating ourselves from our family, moving away from home. That's a sign of success, right? I mean, I certainly was guilty of that myself, because that's just our cultural conditioning. And so a lot of women are alone. The men are feeling the weight of the world on their shoulders because they're having to provide the finances for this potentially expensive venture, expensive, because it's outside of what they had planned. It's like we also have to like manage our disappointment of what we imagine this beautiful, easy life of parenting to be, because parenting is not easy for anyone, much less if someone has complex needs. But then the mom feels alone, and so reminding parents too that it is hard, to feel like you're navigating this alone, and this is where it's helpful to have someone like yourself, because we don't have the generations of help surrounding most of us, and that's something that you can help them, I'm sure, put perspective to what is considered support, because again, some people, they depend on their Facebook support group
Right.
to support them, and then you get overwhelmed, but oh my gosh, well, maybe I need to treat them for parasites. And you get stuck on these all these things, that these rabbit holes from other parents, and you're feeling like you're missing out because you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about this. My doctor didn't think about this. Uh
Mhm.
and you get wrapped up in that, so how do you help them navigate even the which support groups are helpful versus which ones are not at this point, or at what part of the game are you able to step in and help people navigate through those difficult times?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think when it comes to what you're describing, it's like the whack-a-mole where parents just kind of move from one thing to another. And again, there's so much coming at parents in terms of what to do, what not to do, and the like. Um, uh, Generally speaking, I feel like with parents, they can just for at least a certain amount of time pause all that, right? Because if they can just get clearer on for their unique child where to focus. And I say that because it's not clear often. And it's important that a parent have the right people on the team, including someone, with an MD after their name, right? They need a good medical guide. But there's also other people in the mix, therapists, other practitioners, perhaps even marital therapists. There's a lot of people that can be on your team, but the key is the parent being the CEO, being the decision maker in chief, and hiring well in those various spots. But where I come in is the concept of this strategy that we talked about before. A strategy has to be in place, and the best strategy is going to be one that is addressing the two or three root causes that are the most important to focus on at that time for that child. And that's where, again, there's going to be a lot of advisors helping to inform the parent, but ultimately it comes down to a parent making a guess. Which root causes right now for my child? And there is a sequencing here where some root causes are more important to focus on early than later. But if a parent of a child with autism is going to invest a lot of money doing stem cell therapy, but yet there's no foundation where like with a gut that's operating the way it's intended, with the child's sleeping environment not being bombarded by EMFs and mold and all those kind of things. There's some certain things to focus on first to make sure the child has a strong foundation before you focus on higher order interventions. So that's where every child's unique. And although it's a little bit uncomfortable for a parent to really understand the different root causes that might be at play for their child and choose not 10 to focus on, but two or three that are the most important to focus on now for the child, then they can devise a plan to say, okay, for these root causes, I want to make sure that some of my efforts are addressing those root causes. You can still address symptoms. You could do behavioral therapy and other interventions, but none of the stuff that's available for autism parents gets to the root cause of anything. It's a hamster wheel where you get a diagnosis based on symptoms to get, support and services that help you manage and cope with those symptoms. There's nothing getting to the root cause. And that's why I keep going back to you need a strategy, and it has to be at least in part focused on the key underlying root causes for your child.
Thankfully, there's more and more medical professionals out there that are training in this. And even for me, I've been training for years in integrative medicine and functional medicine, and I still feel like the science is coming out so fast. And there's also division within the autism community too that can make it a little confusing, I think, for some people as well. So, and healthcare providers are doing the best they know how. They're trying to learn to catch up, and some are more advanced than others. And so that's those. I have compassion to any of the parents, obviously, navigating through these, especially. It's almost even overwhelming in some ways how much there is out there
It is. It is, and you're
too.
you're 100% right. There's many more practitioners who are more skilled to be able to support families and children with these complex challenges, and that's a good thing. And it's also part of the overwhelm, right? There's so many different options. But what I've learned, especially walking alongside of parents, is it's pretty straightforward with getting out of their head who those right practitioners are for them to assemble that team. And then again, it's about with the parent trusting their intuition, their sense that nobody knows their child better than them. You know, putting I look at it like pin the tail on the donkey. They get three tacks to focus their efforts, right? And if they can discern what are those three key areas for my child right now, again with a root cause focus, they're much more likely to be having their time, energy, and money devoted to things that are going to move the needle the most. And so that's where, again, the parents in the best position, even though none of us feel qualified,
Right.
we still get to make that call, and you want to be the one to make that call.
And of course, again, going back to the parents putting on their own oxygen mask first before they do their child, because they have to. We had talked earlier a little bit about that. There's a lot of guilt and shame for taking too much time for yourself. And, I remember when I actually, my children had pretty significant vaccine reactions. And so I was navigating that, trying to open up a new business. And there's all these stressful things going on. And someone like, you need to take care of yourself. And I was like, I'm too busy. I've got too many things on my list, and I've got too many people depending on me. And the first time I went to the acupuncture, I thought I was going to be working the whole time, and I was couldn't move because of all these needles all in me. And I'm like, it stressed me out. It took me about 3 times before I could actually like, oh, I guess I could just sleep. And then when I just slept in that 45 minutes, I was more rested. So then I was more clear. I was more efficient. And so
Mhm.
just saying this to the patients, to the parents out there, that if you're feeling this sense of overwhelm, you have to stop and slow down. The world is not going to burn down around you, and you'll be way more equipped to manage the things that come at you in a more calm, balanced way. I mean, I get to them like, why did I let it get this far? But it's that hard lesson, and I had to be really pushed. And I know a lot of parents, especially if you are right in the thick or that initial shock of realizing, oh, well, this is not going to be just a picnic. As you learn how to navigate your nervous system. Oh,
There's a lot of resistance. We all have it. No parent ever gets a diagnosis like autism or PANDAS and then raises their hand saying, okay, great. My first step is I'm going to focus on myself, right? Nobody does that. But ironically, that's their most powerful move because none of us show up really equipped to be a parent or to be a parent of a child with complex challenges. So that oxygen mask first type of thing, it is true. And again, parents, if you can focus on that step first, even though society's telling you to push through it, you focus on yourself down the road. It's easy for us parents to become martyrs, but it doesn't take much for us to realize, how's this going to play out if I continue not to get to a better place, to focus on my self-care, to do my own work if I have these stories I'm telling myself that are making it harder for me to show up the way my child wants me to show up. So again, we all know it's important, but society kind of rewards us not, you know, taking action. But if a parent can do that, again, it may seem selfish, but it's honestly the greatest intervention you can do for your child is your own work. And it doesn't have to take a long amount of time, but if you skip that step, everything becomes harder.
There's so many books out there that can help, and obviously, therapists, the cheapest ways to do some good book readings on how to help your own triggers or your own
Mhm.
energy, help you become more, get off the victim triangle or the victim. Like there's a whole other way to live than to be on there, and it's life is way better off that triangle.
It's so true. Now there's lots of different resources out there. I tend more recently though to kind of whether it's for a child who's on the spectrum or with these complex challenges or the parent themselves, both are usually in some form of fight or flight. The nervous system is dysregulated. So I'm a big fan of Dr. Neil Nathan and his approach, which
Yes.
really talks about okay, that is a key root cause. So when I talked about the pin and tail on a donkey, like what root cause are you gonna focus on? There's a lot of power to focusing on the dysregulated nervous system as one of those key root causes. And if you do that, the way Dr. Nathan talks about it, you kind of have to, in terms of the actions you take, address the three systems at the same time, which is the limbic system, the vagal tone, and the mast cell
Mhm.
activation. And so a lot of times with the parents I advise, they're putting into place some actions that help their child with their child's dysregulated nervous system, and they also are doing their own work to get a more regulated nervous system themselves. And again, parents who see that their decision making is really important see the benefit of getting to that better place.
I learned about the limbic system retraining for people out there like primaltrust.org, retrainingthebrain.com. There's the Gupta program. There's Splankna. There's all kinds of cool things out there now. Like compared to even 5 years from now, it's like exploded. Again, a lot of options can be overwhelming, but that's Dr. Nathan is just incredible. He is an incredible resource for this. When people decide to come to you, who are the best people to choose to come and get your uh, assistance, your guidance?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think any parent dealing with a complex challenge, if they're not feeling really excited about how things are going right now, if they feel like that their plan and their efforts aren't where they want them to be, anyone would benefit from this type of support. But the parents who really fly, who really soar with this, are the ones who are deeply committed, like truly deeply committed, humble enough to be able to work on themselves, to be open to working on themselves. And again, I'm not judging any parents, but some parents don't feel like they have any work to do, that the child's the one with the problems. And again, I respect where any parent is, but if a parent really is like, hey, you know something? I know I'm bringing lousy habits. I know I'm bringing a lack of clarity or whatever the case may be. If a parent has that humility, then that's the other key piece of this. And then finally, a parent who really is willing and able to invest in themselves. Like my program is one-on-one. It moves at the pace of the parent, but that transformation happens fast. But the parent's got to be all in, which is why it's all in parent. And so those are the key components. And if anyone is considering this type of support, you're not investing in me, you're betting on yourself because this is all about getting more empowered, but I don't empower you. You have the power already. You're just not tapping into it. So I've just become, for the last 10 years, focused on why parents stay kind of stuck and how can they make this leap. I've just become really expert at what is it that we're doing as parents that's inadvertently getting in the way. And I'm really gifted at helping parents kick to the curb what's holding them back from being that parent that they know they can be. And we just can't see our own blind spots.
Mhm. So I know we'll put the links under the podcast, but what's your website? How do they reach you?
Yeah, so people can go to allinparent, ALLINPARENT.com. And that's where they can find out more. The podcast is called Autism Parenting Secrets. The website I just gave, You can access the podcast there or on any all the major platforms, Apple podcasts and Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts.
You've been
But
doing
yeah,
that for
it's
years too. You have had incredible guests on there.
yeah, I've really been so fortunate to have amazing dynamite guests like yourself, like Dr. Neil Nathan. The podcast is a great place for parents to start. Really useful insights. It's all in there. About 300 episodes now, and it's approaching 1 million downloads. So it's got really good reach, and it's again, there's a lot of great insight there. But again, if a parent wants to then, learn more, that's a great place to start. But if they want to make this leap fast, that's where the one-on-one work. I've tried a lot of different things to serve parents, membership communities, group coaching. There's nothing that moves the needle like the one-on-one because just like every child's so incredibly unique, every parent shows up in a very unique place. And yeah, no, it's my honor to be able to walk alongside of these parents.
I personally prefer one-on-one too. For me, I also feel everyone's energy. So having a group of people and all their stories just makes my story more cloudy. And you're like, what's really mine, what's theirs, and be able to have that kind of clarity. You just get out the noise. You get out all the, again, well-intended advice from people. Like people are just trying to help, but each kid is so different.
Hmm.
Like there's no one child that is like that. You simply can't follow the same recipe for each child or each family.
You can, and that's where parents are getting so much advice. Again, all well intentioned. It's just that the parent doesn't necessarily need that. And it, again, hearing about support is one thing, but support from someone who does not have a stake in the game, who's not trying to get you to do X, Y, and Z, that's again, that gives you the space as a parent for you to step in to that stronger place to discern. This is what I believe is going to help my child the most. I mean, for my son Rye, he's progressed tremendously. He was moderate, borderline severe autism at 18 months. Now he's 19. He's a happy, connected kid now, wildly unrecognizable to where he was. And that didn't happen by accident. It just didn't. And for him, homeopathy is something that actually saved his life, literally. But that doesn't mean every parent should do homeopathy. That's where, again, what I like, the therapies I like, the doctors I like, that has nothing to do with what's going to be right for a specific parent. So I've really gotten skilled at neutrality. And yes, I'll share resources where they're appropriate. But again, every parent has different values, different priorities. And I want to tap into that or help the parent tap into that. Because again, if they can bet on themselves, their actions, their guess as to where to focus is going to be much more likely to move the needle than any other expert. And so that's where the parent really is the force multiplier, whether they recognize it or not.
Oh, I'm so thankful that you're out there. It'd been nice to have you on my side after my own kids had their challenges when they were younger. It took me probably triple the time to learn, all the techniques to help bring peace into the home, to make it more of a nurturing, safe place for them to grow and develop and heal in, versus the oh my gosh, what's happening around me kind of thing.
Right.
so
Yep.
so thankful for you and happy to have you on here and to share your wisdom.
I just want to just share that up empowering message with parents. Again, you are the one. No expert, no guru. I'm not a guru. You have untapped capacity. You can become that parent that you know your child needs. But again, it really comes down to you betting on yourself. And so I appreciate what you're sharing, Cami, that, you wish I was there early on for you. I wish I was there early on for me too. And if I would have been, I would have probably said, I don't need you. So that's where this opportunity, it does take a parent raising their hand saying, yes, I'm going to bet on myself. And if you do, again, the podcast is extremely helpful. But again, I'd be delighted to, if anyone wants to reach out, they can schedule a call on my website. That call in and of itself is going to put a lot of wind to your back. And I've actually created a score that assesses any parent and gives them their current power level with how they're navigating. Just knowing what your score is and how that would look like, I'd be happy to share that assessment with parents so they can kind of get a clearer read on where they are. And that alone will help them with this transformation that's available to any parent.
And what's so beautiful is that our children are inspiring this transformation. How beautiful is the gift of this child to help us become better humans.
It's a call to action. We're being called to become something greater. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. We didn't ask for it, but you're 100% right. It is a calling. The question is, will you raise your hand? Will you answer the call? And if you're navigating, whether you're overwhelmed or if you still feel like you're navigating well, there's always that higher level, and what a gift to your child if you can do that.
Great. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I'm looking forward to having you on another show down the road.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to having you back on my podcast as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.